Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I am ready to do my full review on this knife. If you haven't watched my unboxing or first impressions of this knife, then to get you up to speed, I adore this knife. This is the most excited I have been about a folding knife since the Koenig Arius, and the Arius has been my favorite knife ever since I first tried one out. I think this genuinely might be my new favorite. It's at least tied with the Arius. I mean, goodness, it is good. So this is the OZ Machine Company Roosevelt, and this one in particular is number 62, as you can see right there. I don't know if with this finish and the lighting it's going to show up very well, but it's numbered number 62. And this knife was loaned to me for review by my buddy Jason from the Millie PM2 Para 3 Club. So, as usual, when Jason loans me a knife, he will be linked down below. I'll link his personal Instagram, which he's been posting a lot of EDC stuff on, and then I'll also link to the Millie PM2 Para 3 Club because he is one of the creators and admins, mods, whatever you want to call it, of that club. So, this knife, there are a lot of reasons why it has won me over so much. Before I jump into that, quick refresher on what we're working with materials wise here. And then, as I mentioned in my first impressions, since I already raved about it so much in that video, I will also be talking about what I think I'd pick spec-wise. Could change by the time that I'm ready to actually get one if my spot comes up, if I get a spot. All of that is yet to be determined, but I have some ideas of what I think would be cool spec-wise. So, first of all, materials. We are rocking a blade in Z-Finite. I don't know if it's Z-Finite or Z-Finite. I think it's Z-Finite. It's basically the equivalent to LC200N, so a very corrosion-resistant steel, okay edge retention, and it's a great steel overall. I quite like it. Is it my favorite steel in the world? No, but I think it's a respectable choice for this knife and what it's kind of designed to be able to do. So, Z-Finite, as you can see, it's got this kind of stone-washed finish on it, which is a little bit high shine. It's got a crown spine, we've got some jimping up here, hole for deployment, obviously. And then scales-wise, we are rocking titanium scales. These in particular have been Cerakoted black. That's an option Jason picked on this one. And the hardware, including the backspacer and the clip, has all been anodized this really nice gold color. I was talking to Jason about that. Apparently Jason literally looked up a chart of different voltages of anodization, and when his spot came up, he sent him the voltage he wanted. He sent OZ Machine Company the voltage he wanted, and OZ was able to do it. And it is really, really cool. I've mentioned already, most kind of like gold or bronze anodization falls much more on the bronze side of that spectrum, and this really does kind of show through as gold. And when it's bronzish, it tends to, like, when it gets the oils of your fingers and stuff on it, it looks a little bit purpley. This looks like this kind of orangey, pinkish, like salmon color when it gets a little bit oily. It's very different and cool, and I like it. I think it looks cool, and it contrasts well with the black Cerakote. Just a really good looking knife. If this was the one I owned, I would not be sad about it at all. So, Jason, if you want to sell it to me, let me know. But yeah, so this knife, it's just very good materials, and the details are all very good. The build is just excellent. There's so much good happening here. So I'm going to kind of break it down piece by piece and just talk about some of my favorite things. Firstly, let's start at the blade, because that's a good place to start on a knife. I don't think he crowns the spines on all of his. I don't know. I think Jason must have just asked him to do that. I love a crown spine. I think it feels so much nicer than just having 90-degree angles on the top spine of your blade. It adds a certain sense of class to me. I don't know if I'm alone there, but I really, really like it. When I come across a knife that has a crown spine, I almost always appreciate it. Now, the finish on this blade is fantastic as well. The edge that came on it is stupid sharp. It's really well sharpened. And then most importantly, the profile of this blade. I've done some very light cutting with it, just like tape mostly. I've opened a couple of packages. I've put it through some paper just to feel how it would perform because, again, this is not my knife. It's a very expensive, very impossible to get knife. So I've been gentle with it. But the ability of this blade to cut, because it's such a tall, full flat grind, and it starts out as an already pretty thin blade stock, it performs so well based on the limited testing I've been able to do so far. And I think for the estimation of what this knife is kind of built for, it's such a good grind. This isn't meant to be a hard use, heavy duty, over the top, like overbuilt folder. This is an EDC knife that I would say is more kind of light to medium duty. Opening packages, zip ties here and there, like have in your pocket day after day to do normal knife stuff with. It's not an outdoor beater. It's classier than that. And I think the way it's ground is just, it's really, really good. Yeah, so the grind is fantastic. The finish is very good. I love the crown spine. The edge that came on it is fantastic. One thing I mentioned in my first impressions as well, the profile of the blade, as you can see, it tapers. So it starts thicker down here and gets thinner toward the tip, so that even though the edge comes up to meet the tip here, which would normally translate to a pretty thick edge up toward the tip, because he's tapered it down as he's gotten closer to the tip, it's still stupid thin behind the edge all the way up to the tip. So it's just, like, performance-wise, I respect the way this knife is ground. So yeah, the blade is fantastic. Deployment and action in general is so good. The detent system on this, it has 2 ceramic detent balls on the face of this lock. So instead of just one, it's got double the amount of detents that are locked in and holding this just the right amount of secure. Like the poppiness of it, it's not like a shakeout knife. This knife is not gonna just shake free. It has a very tactile break. It's like a well-dialed trigger on a firearm, where there's just a clean break, and it's so satisfying to middle finger flick. I just insert my finger like so, that's what she said, and it bombs away. It's every time that I flick it open, I enjoy so much the sensation of that pop, and then the speed with which it flies out, and then the sound it makes when it locks open. Yeah, there's something about a knife that sounds good that just adds another layer to the experience, and this knife sounds really, really cool. It's not super drop shutty, although it's very smooth. It's on bearings, so it's not like you can't shake it shut. I mean, give it a little wrist and it goes all the way home, but it's not a guillotine. And I think probably if this was a heavy blade, it would be, but this is a very light blade. So yeah, action, just really, really good. I wouldn't change anything about it. I wouldn't add a flipper tab. I don't think I'd make it able to like front flip easily. Although I feel like I've seen somebody in videos do it. I can't do it. Maybe it's the spacing of the jimping on this one. I don't know. But yeah, I wouldn't add another method. I just want to middle finger flick it. I have seen quite a few people do a lot of thumb deployments, and I frankly suck at thumb deploying this knife. I don't know. Usually I'm pretty good at like fidgeting with a knife in any way that it can be fidgeted with, but I suck at thumb opening this one for some reason. Maybe it's the angle, I don't know. But I don't care. I just want to do that over and over and over. This middle finger flicking is my favorite way to open a knife anyways. So yeah, action, superb. Let's talk ergos for a minute. The ergos on this knife are phenomenal for my hands. And I have like the littlest bit of breathing room, which makes me feel like even if you've got bigger hands than mine, you'll still be in love with these ergos. The way that these grooves are cut, you've got the kind of forward choil here, if you will, and then this groove, and then kind of a flat, although I guess there's a little bit of curve there, just a little bit. But the way that my hand rests into all of that shaping is really, really good. This knife is not grippy anywhere. It's got a little bit of jimping here, but I don't even really touch that jimping for the most part. It doesn't need texture. This doesn't need to be Peel Ply G10 or Rough Micarta or anything for me to get a really solid purchase on it, because the way that the handle is shaped and the way that these grooves interface with my hand, it's really locked in. I love the sensation I get when I'm in a saber grip on this knife. It's really good. If I'm not using the forward choil, it's still very good. My pinky starts to dangle kind of half on, half off when I'm not in the forward choil, but I don't really find myself ever holding the knife like this. I kind of intuitively, my hand always wants to go up here, and it makes the knife feel a lot bigger in hand than it looks or feels otherwise. And I love that when a smallish knife is able to feel bigger than it is because of the way the handles are shaped and the ergos are thought out. It's just really, really good. It's been said before that it kind of feels, and I was actually on a Zoom chat last night with Thomas Moore, who borrowed this knife from Jason before I did. Jason was on the chat and a couple other guys, and I mentioned to Thomas this parallel that I've heard it said, and I agree, it feels kind of native-esque, like the Spyderco Native 5, but it's like a grown-up version of the Native 5. It's obviously a titanium frame lock instead of a back lock, so that's a big win over the Native. But the profile of it and the way that my hand interfaces with it reminds me of my Native 5. It's just like a little bit taller. It fills the hand a little bit better even. At least for me, it's like an enhanced Native 5, and the Native 5 has very good ergos for me. So if you've experienced a Native 5, that might help you to understand a little bit of what I'm talking about with how this forward choil works and how it fits in the hand otherwise. Yeah, so ergos are phenomenal. Action is phenomenal. The blade is phenomenal. Let's talk carry. So the internal milling on this guy is pretty extensive, especially on the show scale. The lock side does have a big pocket milled out as well, but it's a very lightweight knife. This knife it's not bug out light, but as titanium frame locks go, for the actual size of this knife overall, this isn't a big knife, but I wouldn't call it a small knife either. It's really lightweight considering its size and the materials used. The internal milling certainly helps with that. The thinness of it definitely helps as well. These scales are not overly thick for no reason. They're an appropriate thickness for a titanium scale. The backspacer is nice and thin because the blade is nice and thin. The clip is somewhat minimalist. It's not trying too hard or just being overly beefy for no reason. And everything about it is thin and hollowed out and profiled well. And so the way that translates into how it goes in pocket is that it's just an absolute breeze to carry. I really enjoy knives that can fit for me in either a primary or a secondary role. I just get a kick out of it because I carry two knives every day. I carry a primary in my front right pocket, and I carry a secondary usually in my back left pocket. If it's colder months, then sometimes it's in my jacket or something, but my primary always goes front right pocket. I've carried this as a primary a good handful of times, and it's an excellent knife to have as a primary. I don't feel like this isn't enough knife for me to have in that pocket. It's very comfortable to do so. But the fact that it's small and slim and light enough and pocketable enough that it's totally not only acceptable, but very good as a secondary knife for me. Just doubles the amount of frequency with which I'll carry it. Because if I'm carrying a beefy primary, and say it's my Demco 8020, that's a beast of a knife, this would be an awesome secondary. And what a cool carry that is, to have a beast of a primary and then this as a secondary. It's just like, it seems like a flex of a secondary knife to me. But the fact that I can use it as both just doubles the likelihood that I'm going to take it with me, and it'll be a knife that's in my pocket for a day. And this is a knife that if I owned one, I would carry so much. It would be one of my favorite knives to carry, and I can say that with confidence because every time I've had it in pocket, I have loved that I've had it in pocket. It's just so freaking good. So yeah, there's nothing about this knife that I can say I don't like. There are a couple of things, if I was speccing my own, that I would do a little bit differently, I think. But like I said, if this was the one I owned, I would be thrilled. I would be absolutely floored to own this knife. Or pretty much any of the builds that I've seen. If you follow the OZ Machine Company Instagram, he catalogs one by one as he's doing these builds. He's showing them, and as they're completed, he does a video showing all the details of the knife. And so I've watched all of his builds for a while, and I've gone back to pretty much the beginning of his builds, and just I've wanted to see like all of them, and just about everything that comes out of that dude's shop is just excellent. So freaking good. So yeah, let's talk about what I would do if I was speccing my own. There's a couple of things that I don't know if they're actually options that I would ask him for, but if he couldn't do, wouldn't be a big deal. That's two things actually. So the two things I would ask for would be, one, if I could do no lanyard hole. The lanyard hole doesn't bother me at all. It's super out of the way. It doesn't mess with anything. I don't feel it when I'm on the knife. But I don't like lanyard holes. I'm never going to put a lanyard on this knife or any knife that I own. That's just, I don't like lanyards on knives, personally. So I would kind of dig it if mine just didn't even have the option for it. It would make it feel more like mine. So I don't know if he would do that. Maybe. If he would, I would want no lanyard hole. The other thing I would do differently than this one is no jimping, if he would do that. I don't know if he would. Maybe that's something he considers a crucial part of the design, and because that's not like a finish option like the lanyard hole, maybe that's not something he would do. But if he would allow me to omit the jimping completely, I would. This jimping is good jimping. It's not offensive to me. It doesn't hurt my finger. It's not like a problem. It doesn't really bother me that it's there. But I prefer no jimping. So if I could do no lanyard hole and no jimping, that would be an awesome start to making the knife already feel like mine. Even if I did everything else about it completely plain Jane. Just the Z-Finette, stone-washed blade, and then plain Jane tie handles, plain Jane tie hardware, and it had those things, it would then feel like mine, because that would be cool. But one thing that's cool about the way his options work, from what I've perceived and heard and started to understand, is A, there's a lot of options, but B, a lot of the things you can do are included at the $500 mark. So you already get all nice hardware just like this, and it's the same knife, and you can do any analyzation that you want included on the titanium, which is great. So there's a lot of options already between the scales, the hardware, and as evidenced by this analyzation and a lot of the analyzation and finishes that I've seen in his other builds, you could have a lot of fun just keeping this as a $500 knife and not adding coatings or Damascus or Timascus or zirconium, or you wouldn't need to add any of those things to make this an exciting looking knife. So I like that. But there are a lot of options that you can do, many of which I just mentioned. So part of me is torn. I would want to make sure I had a crown spine for sure. I'm not positive yet whether I would do coated handles like this Cerakote but in a different color, and I'll talk about what I would do if I did, or whether I would do some cool anodization. What I'm thinking at the moment would be really, really cool is, it's an idea I've kind of had for a knife in general for a long time, that I thought, I've been thinking for years, would be a cool spec to do on a knife, and this might be like the right platform to finally kind of make it come true. I hope none of you go and steal this and do it before me, but if you do, more power to you. I'll clap because it'll look cool. If you're familiar with the automotive world, and specifically racing, obviously that's a very broad statement, but there is a livery that is famous, been used by Ford on the GT race cars, as well as a number of other cars at this point in time. But it is the Gulf livery. And the Gulf livery is what's called Gulf blue. It's kind of like a powdery, very light blue, almost like sky blue maybe. So Gulf blue is a specific color, and then it has orange and white decals. So the primary like colorway on top of the blue is this bright orange, and then like the spots where they put the numbers and the text will be in white. So it's like primarily biggest color would be Gulf blue, and then this nice bright orange, and then details in like white. So what I was thinking could be very cool is if I did a Cerakote in Gulf blue, and then did all orange hardware, including the clip, the backspacer, all of that. And then I think for the blade, I'd probably want it to be like satin or kind of high shine, kind of like this. I don't know yet how or where I would incorporate any white, or if I would feel like I need to. It might be enough with the orange and blue and some satin. But I think that would be really different and cool and kind of wild, and something that I haven't seen before on a knife. But then there's another part of me that would love to just keep it fairly basic and do like a really cool, probably bronze ano, like a nice like kind of darker, deeper, like earthy bronze ano, and then black hardware. And he's got some pivot hardware that I've seen that has like kind of 3 spokes on it with little divots drilled in. It looks kind of enhanced compared to this more basic hardware, so I might spring for that. But I'm thinking logically, I don't know which would make the better user, because if I get one of these, hopefully I can get on his books and actually get one of these. If I do, it's going to be a user. It's going to be a knife that's going to go in my pocket and I'm going to carry and I'm going to use. I don't know whether the Cerakote would hold up better, or whether I'd be better off just going with an ano, which if the ano got scuffed or something, it would probably be easier to re-anodize than to recoat the knife, or I don't know. I'm trying to think long term and longevity and what would be coolest, but those are kind of my two where I'm at the moment. I don't plan on doing anything super fancy. I'm not a big Timascus guy to begin with. I think it can look very cool, especially the way he does it. There's been some Timascus clips and backspacers that look really, really cool to me. Less like an oil spill like everybody else does, where it's bronze and purple and blue and like every color. And instead he'll like get one color, and then it'll be black Timascus or Zircuti or whatever you call it. So it'll be like black and blue or black and purple, and that looks kind of cool to me. But I don't think that's justifiable to me personally, because I'm not looking at this knife as something to be like a Grail collection piece that's going to sit in the safe. I'm sure there are some people who get those crazy Timascus things and still carry them, but for me, I would want to keep it relatively basic and make a user out of the knife that still looks fancy and cool enough to be exciting. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now. I guess that's kind of two ideas. I'm leaning a little bit towards the kind of Gulf livery, if that would be possible. And I think based on what I've seen from him, that would probably be doable. You can do Cerakote. As long as they offer colors like what I'd be looking for, that would work. But there's also the chance that I get a book spot and my spot doesn't come up for 6 months or a year. I don't know how many book spots he's going to take or how long it'll take for him to get to mine. Maybe it's in 2 weeks. Maybe it's in months and months and months. So depending on how long it is, my ideas could change. But that's where I am at the moment on it. So I guess long story short, this is my new favorite knife. Realistically, if I could only have this knife or my Arius, which I've been very open for a while, has been my favorite knife, I would take this. And it's not just because this is harder to get. Like, even if I could only have one and I couldn't buy another one, have never had an opportunity to get another, I could only pick this or the Arius, I think I would pick this. The way it works for me is even better than the Arius. And the Arius works really, really well for me as a knife. But this carries so much slimmer. I feel like it cuts a little better. The action is still so satisfying to me. Very different from an Arius action. Not being a flipper, just being middle finger only. Not being a guillotine drop shutter. But this action is so satisfying to me. Luckily, I live in a world where I don't necessarily have to make that choice. But the reason why I say I would make that choice is because that's the only way I can really come to a decision. If I've held both knives next to each other and really sat there and thought it out. If I could only have one, which would it be? And of course it's the one that I don't have and possibly can't have for a long time. Yeah, I'm going to be a wreck if I don't get a book spot for this knife, because I really feel like I need one. So hopefully soon I have an Arius and a Roosevelt, and then I'll just be very, very happy. But yeah, again, huge thanks to Jason for loaning this to me. This is going back in the mail to him ASAP, because I'm sure he misses this knife quite a lot at this point. He didn't have it for very long before sending it out to a couple of us, his friends, to check it out, and that's very cool of him. So yeah, this is going to be on the way back to Jason, and I'm going to miss it the second that it's gone. I already kind of miss it, and it's still in my hands. It is such a good knife. Yeah, I guess I'll just kind of leave it at that for this one. This has been kind of a long one, a lot of rambling. If you don't like my rambling, screw you. I don't care. That's what my channel is. So that'll be what that's going to be. But thank you guys for checking it out. I appreciate it. And this has been fun. Wish me luck. Keep me in your prayers that I'm going to get one of these. That's probably not something you should be praying about, but you know what I mean. Thanks, guys.